Hey, come here! Look what I found! It's some kind of ancient book. Look at the cover. 13 masks all lined up next to each other. These must be the dragon priests of Skyrim. Look, it catalogs who they were thousands of years ago. Their dark secrets could be in this book. Quickly, grab a torch, bring it close. We must learn what we're up against. Starting off with number 1, we have Hevnoraak, and he can be found inside of Volsung. His name translates to brutality. Wearing his mask grants immunity to all diseases and poisons. Now, during his life, he was master at a certain type of mind-controlling magic, and he used this to build a massive army of followers. While under this spell, he would perform these horribly painful and sadistic kinds of torture on these people, and no matter how bad it ever got, they could never break free. They were so locked by his control. Even in death, they still guard his ancient tomb. Now, toward the end of his life, he became so obsessed with living forever that he came up with this plan. He drained his blood into 3 vessels that once he was ready to awaken, he could use to then restore his powers, scour the world endlessly. Luckily, there was a Nord warrior named Valdar who did stop this reawakening, but only for so long. Number 2, we have Krosis, and you can find him on top of the high peak known as Shearpoint. His name translates to sorrow. Wearing his mask gives you an extra 20 points in lock-picking, archery, and alchemy. Now, very little is known about his life, but it should be noted that he's one of the only few dragon priests not buried inside of a tomb. He's in this sarcophagus out in the open mountains. He also uses a staff of fireballs, even though his natural abilities are those of frost magic, so this is possibly a way to confuse his enemies. Number 3, we have Morokei, and he can be found in Labyrinthian. His name translates to glorious. Wearing his mask lets you regenerate magicka 100% faster. Now, it's during the College of Winterhold questline that you will encounter him, and during this, Savos Arin, the Archmage, tells you he's already risen before many years ago. You see, Savos, back when he was just an apprentice, went on an expedition here with 5 other students, but they accidentally caused him to awaken. So 3 of them had already been killed, and Savos forced the last 2 to sacrifice their life essences to create this barrier that would hold Morokei. And it's been like that ever since. He's just been locked here. Now, after all this time, if you do want to retrieve the magical Staff of Magnus, he must once again be released. Number 4, we have Volsung, and he can be found at the summit of Volsung. His name translates to horrible. Wearing his mask makes prices 20% better, gives you 20 points in carrying capacity, and lets you breathe underwater. Now, even though his name does mean horrible, it can also have a much more literal meaning as horror of the air. That's because Vol translates to horror, and Su, the next part of his name, translates to air. This is a monster among the cold wind. Number 5, we have Nahkriin, and he can be found in Skuldafn during the main questline. His name translates to vengeance. Wearing his mask gives you plus 50 magicka and reduces the cost of your destruction and restoration spells by 20%. Now, Alduin really must think of him as quite capable, because he's been put in charge of maintaining the only portal to Sovngarde to potentially immense power. The only way in is with a special artifact called the Dragon Priest Staff, and it's in Nahkriin's possession. He holds access to the Nordic afterlife, and given this privilege, his deadliness must be well known among dragons. Number 6, we have Otar the Mad, and he can be found in Ragnvald. Wearing his mask improves your resistance to fire, frost, and shock by 30%. Now, Otar was once a chief who ruled over Ragnvald back in the Merithic era, and at first he was a very well-liked leader, strong in battle, fair to his people, but just something over time corrupted his mind, turned him crazy, so he became this dragon priest and then abused all the people that he ruled over. So eventually, 2 heroes, Sarek and Torsten, were sent to stop his tyranny, but he was just too powerful, they couldn't kill him. So instead they did this, they focused on locking him in a large tomb that could only be opened by 2 skull keys that each of them kept, and they pledged to forever guard them. So even after all this time, these heroes, now Draugr, have kept their promise, guarding this cruel tyrant. Number 7, we have Vokun, and he can be found within Highgate Ruins. His name translates to Shadow. Wearing his mask reduces the cost of conjuration, illusion, and alteration spells by 20%. Now, he can be encountered during the quest A Scroll for Onska, where you go looking for a scroll that has the famous hero Ysgramor's bloodline on it. And given Vokun's close proximity to this, it's possible that he was very interested in this. Perhaps he was alive when Ysgramor was, back in the Merithic era, and he wanted to kill him, but, being unsuccessful, maybe he then tried to go after all of his bloodline instead to put an end to his legacy. Or at least planned to do that once he had awakened. Perhaps only a shadow is capable of tracking down an entire family. Number 8, we have Rahgot, and he can be found within Forlhast. His name translates to anger. Wearing his mask increases your stamina by 70 points. Now, he was one of the last dragon cultists back in the First Era. See, King Harald, the first Nordic king of Skyrim, discovered the cult hiding out in that stronghold, so he laid siege to it for several weeks. Rahgot, fearing no way of survival, ordered the rest of the cultists to poison themselves and then commit mass suicide while he went off and buried himself in the temple. So the idea was that when the king's men would find them all dead, they hopefully would just give up searching the rest of the fortress. Well, they did all kill themselves, and the rest worked just as planned. The king thought they were all dead. Now, Rahgot's body is still preserved, waiting to be awakened. Number 9, moving on to the priests who can be found on Solstheim in the Dragonborn DLC, we have Dukaan, and he can be found in White Ridge Barrow. His name translates to dishonor. Wearing his mask grants you a 50% resistance to frost and increases the damage of your frost spells by 25%. Now, he has the unique ability to summon Seekers in combat, as well as an exclusive spell called Frost Stream, and this is going to deal 20 points of frost damage for every 5 seconds that it's cast. Also, another translation of his name is Devour Kine, so it is possible that he used to worship her back when he was a human, but his transformation into a dragon priest has led to his, quote, dishonor. Number 10, we have Ahzidal, and he can be found within Kolbjorn Barrow. His name translates to Bitter Destroyer. Wearing his mask gives you a 50% resistance to fire, and your fire spells do 25% more damage. Now, back when he was just a boy, he was very precocious with magic. In fact, he would become the first great Nord enchanter, and the first human to ever master the elven ways of arcane magic. Thing is, his home city, Sarthal, had been ravaged by the snow elves, and he swore to exact revenge. So he studied the arcane arts from all the elves, only to use that power against them. He even worked with Ysgramor to wipe all of them out of Skyrim, so eventually his revenge was fulfilled, but it didn't end there. His hunger for knowledge drove him insane, led him to join in with the Dragon Priest, then even further, to explore the Plains of Oblivion. No information could be kept from him, so it finally got so bad, the Dragon Cult, they had to seal him away within Kolbjorn Barrow, surrounded by all the relics that he had gathered. Even in death, this restless mind cries out for more and more and more. Number 11, we have Zahkriisos, and he can be found within Bloodskull Barrow. His name translates to Bloody Sword. Wearing his mask gives you a 50% resistance to shock, and your shock spells do 25% more damage. Now, the only way to open his tomb is with an ancient relic known as the Bloodskull Blade, and it shoots out waves of energy, almost as if powered by the very souls that it's consumed. It's possible that this is the weapon he brought into battle during his human life, and if so, this would suggest where he gets his name, Bloody Sword. He could have been such a formidable warrior that the first thing you notice when looking at him is that his blade is soaked with those who opposed him. Number 12, we have Vahlok the Jailer, and he can be found within Vahlok's tomb. His name translates to Guardian. He's the only one who doesn't have a mask that you can loot, but unlike the other priests, he's also the only one who's been remembered as a good leader. See, back when he was just a human dragon priest, he discovered the plans of one of his peers to overthrow their dragon overlords, so he stepped in, and this resulted in a battle so massive that it literally tore Solstheim from the mainland of Skyrim. Luckily, though, he did temporarily defeat his opponent, and the Dragon Lords rewarded him by making him ruler of the entire island, just as long as he stayed vigilant and prepared in case that other priest ever returned, thus, giving him the title of Guardian. But according to Skull lore, it was during his rule that Solstheim had great peace and prosperity, and even among dragons, he was a reflection of strength and courage. And finally, number 13, we have Miraak. His name translates to Allegiance Guide. Wearing his mask increases your magicka by anywhere from 40 to 70 points, and it is he who battled with Vahlok, he who betrayed his dragon masters. See, he came under the servitude of Hermaeus Mora, who then gave him the power to bend dragons to his will. Now, as you know, his rebellion still didn't work because he was defeated by Vahlok, but before being dealt that killing blow, Hermaeus Mora transported him to Apocrypha, where, over time, he could gain more knowledge and then go back even more powerful than ever. This is why the dragons wanted Vahlok to be prepared in case he returned. Well, now, it's a couple hundred years into the Fourth Era, and Miraak is making that very return. With the sponsorship of a Daedric prince and the power as Dragonborn to control those who once ruled over him, he's become the most fearsome priest that you'll ever have to face, and unlike the others, he isn't going to wait to be uncovered. Wow, that was one hell of a book! We should take this back to Winterhold. This could really come in handy. Oh, right here, in the back, the author signed it. It says, Rainulf. Must have been some kind of scholar. Or Nord warrior, who knows? Or maybe, because of just how much he knows, maybe he was a dragon priest himself.